You're a witch. You're going to hurt him.
This is not a prophecy scene. Melisandre grabs a child's face and lists eye colors like a shopping order. Every fan remembers this moment as foreshadowing, a clue planted for later seasons to eventually cash in. It's something far colder than that. She isn't predicting Arya's future here. She's assigning it, in broad daylight, to a child who never agreed to any of these terms. Watch whose hand moves first in this exchange, because this single detail is everything. Here's what I want to argue. This scene is not about foreseeing Arya's kills. Not really. It's about an adult repurposing a child's rage as raw material for her own religion. Melisandre needs proof her god is real. She's just watched Thoros claim a resurrection he can't fully explain, even to himself, and she needs a miracle of her own to stand beside his. A frightened, furious 10-year-old is far easier to reshape into that miracle than a grown man who'd ask questions, negotiate terms, or simply walk away unconvinced. So she doesn't calm Arya down. She doesn't offer comfort, food, or any promise of safety. She skips every gesture an adult would normally use to soothe a frightened, grieving child in front of her. Instead, she points a name at Arya's fear and calls that name destiny. That's the pattern this entire scene runs on, start to finish. Not comfort. Conversion. Every apex manipulator in this show performs some version of the same move. Take what someone already feels deep down and hand it back to them relabeled as fate, purpose, or prophecy. Melisandre just performs it on a child, out in the open, in front of witnesses, and calls the whole exchange kindness. Let me break it all down for you, beat by beat, starting with the ground she lays before she ever touches Arya at all. That groundwork starts with someone else entirely.
He was my friend, and he was dead. And they were the only words I knew. And for the first time in my life, the Lord replied. Beric's eyes opened. Our God is the one true God.
Thoros tells Melisandre how he brought Beric back from death again. For the first time in my life, he says, the Lord replied. That single line is the authority Melisandre is quietly borrowing for herself.
You've been to the other side.
The other side? There is no other side. I have been to the darkness, my lady.
She doesn't need her own miracle yet. She just needs to stand close enough to someone else's miracle that the glow rubs off convincingly on her. A god who can raise the dead outranks gold, outranks swords, outranks even Lannister money and every threat that comes with it. Melisandre spends this entire beat quietly attaching herself to that authority well before she ever lays a hand on Arya at all. Watch how patient this is. She isn't improvising a prophecy on the spot the way it might look on a first viewing. She's building the case for one, sentence by sentence, methodically, well before she actually needs it in front of anyone. By the time she finally reaches Arya, all of this groundwork is already finished and waiting. That's the part fans skip past on the way to the eye color line.
Point penetrates plate at 200 yards.
Still just an observer standing at the edge of everyone else's business. Gendry explains the arrowhead he's forging by hand. Penetrates plate at 200 yards, he says, visibly proud of his own craft. This detail matters more than it looks like it should. Gendry has a skill the Brotherhood actively needs to survive. He can be traded, valued, kept safely useful to the people around him. Arya has nothing here that men need, only a name that isn't safe to say out loud and a temper nobody's found any use for yet.
I didn't like that woman.
That's because you're a girl.
Notice her hands specifically in this shot. Empty at her sides. Everyone else around her is making something, trading something, worth something concrete to somebody. I don't like that woman, Arya says quietly, watching Melisandre pass by their camp. Gendry brushes the comment off as a girl thing, nothing more serious than that. He's wrong to dismiss it so quickly. It isn't intuition or nerves or jealousy. It's threat recognition, arriving early, uninvited, and entirely accurate. This is worth sitting with for a moment. Arya has spent this entire season learning to read danger correctly faster than the adults around her manage to. Gendry reads craftsmanship. Arya reads people, and she's rarely wrong about the dangerous ones. Nobody in this camp is listening to the one person who actually clocked the threat first. Melisandre stops circling Gendry from a distance and buys him outright in full view of everyone present.
Stop! He wants to be one of you! He wants to join the Brotherhood! Stop them!
We serve the Lord of Light. And the Lord of Light needs this boy.
Arya lunges to stop at the moment she understands what's happening. She physically cannot. He wants to join the Brotherhood. Someone lies out loud to cover the sale. Stop them! Arya shouts at anyone nearby, and nobody within earshot moves to help her.
We can't defend the people without weapons and horses and food. And we can't get weapons and horses and food without gold.
Gold moves in plain sight here, not hidden behind a tent or a private conversation. Arya is meant to see exactly this part of the transaction unfold. A quieter target might just feel betrayed privately and go silent, absorb the loss internally, and move on without ever making a scene about it. Arya doesn't have a silent setting built into her anywhere. She only has furious at full volume every single time something like this happens to her. That's the exact material Melisandre came all this way to harvest. Not obedience, which is common and replaceable. Rage, still hot, still actively looking for somewhere real to land. Rage bends easier than loyalty ever does in the long run, and Melisandre already knows this from long experience. She's watching this entire transaction unfold from a distance, saying nothing, taking notes without a pen.
You're not doing this for your god. You're doing it for gold.
We're doing it for both, girl.
Watch Arya try the one weapon she still has left available to her. Truth, spoken out loud without flinching or backing down. You're not doing this for your god, she says directly. You're doing it for gold. She's completely right, and being right costs her something real in this moment. It costs her the last belief she was still quietly holding on to. That adults with causes still genuinely mean their causes, even out here, even now, even after everything she's already lost.
You told me this was a brotherhood. You told me I could be one of you.
You're more than they can ever be.
The Brotherhood doesn't even bother denying the accusation. We're doing it for both, girl, Thoros answers back, entirely unbothered by being caught. That answer should logically satisfy her on paper. It doesn't. Not even slightly, not for a second. Being correct about the gold changes absolutely nothing about who still leaves in chains at the end of this exact conversation. Arya has just learned in real time that being right and being powerless can occupy the exact same moment without contradiction. That lesson lands harder than any single insult could. She grew up around lords who dressed self-interest in honor and titles. Out here, stripped of castles and banners, the Brotherhood does the exact same thing with smaller words and plainer clothes. Different scenery. Same trade. You thought this scene was about a prophecy. It was actually about ownership, staked out well in advance.
They are just foot soldiers in the Great War. You will make kings rise and fall.
Melisandre tells Gendry, "You will make kings rise and fall." Notice the method carefully here. Flattery first, reserved specifically for the one she needs compliant and willing.
I see a darkness in you. And in that darkness, eyes staring back at me. Brown eyes, blue eyes, green eyes.
Arya gets no flattery at all, none. She gets a hand closing firmly around her jaw instead, without warning, without any consent asked or given. Brown eyes, blue eyes, green eyes, Melisandre says, and Arya cannot pull away from the grip holding her completely still. That grip is the entire thesis of this video compressed down into one single gesture. Melisandre isn't reading Arya's future off her face like a book that was already written somewhere. She's writing it there herself, live in real time, then calling the ink prophecy afterwards so nobody ever questions the authorship behind it. A girl walked into this clearing furious and directionless, with nowhere at all to point her anger. She walks back out of it with a target list instead, handed to her by someone who needed her to carry one far more than Arya herself ever did.
We will meet again.
"We will meet again," Melisandre says, and rides off without waiting for any kind of response at all from Arya. She never needed Arya's agreement here, not once. Consent was never actually part of this transaction, no matter how the scene tries to frame the exchange visually. Watch closely what Arya does the moment that hand finally releases her face. She doesn't cry, and she doesn't run after Gendry's horse the way you might expect, given everything we've already seen of her up to this point. She just stands there instead, silently, holding the sentence Melisandre left lodged inside her like a splinter. That stillness is genuinely new for this character. Every earlier scene in the series shows Arya lunging directly at outcomes, shouting them down, physically fighting whatever stands in front of her at the time. Here, for the very first time on screen, she absorbs an outcome instead of resisting it outright with her whole body. Something got planted in her during this exact moment. Nothing got defeated here at all. The difference between those two things quietly becomes the entire rest of her story. Compare this stillness to how she reacted to Ned's death, or to the Red Wedding rumors reaching her later. Every prior blow made her louder, faster, more reckless. This one, oddly, makes her quiet. Quiet is what a person looks like right after they've been given an assignment, not a wound.
You told me this was a brotherhood. You told me I could be one of you.
Go back one beat further, because there's a second promise breaking here that fans usually miss entirely. "You told me this was a brotherhood," Arya says. "You told me I could be one of you." That line isn't about Gendry at all, not really. It's about Arya. She thought she'd finally found a group willing to let her belong on her own terms, without a name, without a house, without a Lord Father attached to her. The word itself promised inclusion. The sale proves the promise only ever applied to men who could fight or forge something useful. Arya isn't just angry that Gendry gets taken. She's angry that belonging, again, turns out to have fine print she wasn't shown in advance. That's the second betrayal stacked directly under the first one. Gold breaks Gendry's trust. This line breaks Arya's. Melisandre arrives seconds later into a girl who's already been failed twice in one afternoon by two different groups for two different reasons. She isn't creating vulnerability here. She's simply the third person in a row to exploit vulnerability that was already sitting wide open. Timing like that isn't luck. Manipulators rarely need to manufacture an opening. They just need to be standing nearby when someone else's promise finally breaks, ready to offer the very next one before the wound closes. Melisandre is good at many things. Patience with timing is the one that matters most here. Zoom out now, and this single grip becomes the hinge the entire arc eventually turns on. Arya spends the rest of the series collecting names one at a time, writing them down carefully, reciting them like a prayer before sleep, night after night, unbroken, crossing them off her private list in an order only she ever decides. That habit doesn't start with Serial Foral's water dancing lessons, and it doesn't start with Jack and Hgar's coin later on either. It starts right here, in a forest clearing, with a stranger telling a grieving child that killing isn't just her grief anymore. It's her calling now, handed to her without asking.
What do we say to the god of death?
Not today.
It explains why she trains obsessively instead of grieving normally, the way almost anyone else her age would be allowed to. It explains why identity slowly becomes a costume she puts on and removes entirely at will. It explains why she's the one standing in that Godswood years later, blade already moving before anyone else in the room even fully reacts to what's happening. It explains why blue eyes were never just a metaphor to her, not once, not for a single second of the years in between. Melisandre planted a purpose inside a child who had nothing else left to hold on to that particular night. Arya simply outgrew the woman who planted it there in the first place. People don't usually plant purpose in someone by comforting them gently. They plant it by naming the exact thing that scares that person most of all and calling it their destiny instead of naming it as their fear. Do this to an adult, and they'll often argue back immediately, negotiate the terms on offer, or simply walk away entirely unconvinced by the whole performance. Do it instead to a child with nowhere else left to put her fear, and she carries that label for the rest of her life without ever once agreeing to wear it in the first place. That's not mysticism, whatever the show's own mythology wants to call it for its own purposes. It's leverage, carefully dressed up as prophecy so nobody questions the transaction underneath. Melisandre wasn't wrong about the eyes Arya would shut forever, as it eventually turns out, years later. She just was never the one who'd earned the right to say it out loud, to a child, without asking first. This was never a prophecy scene, no matter how many times fans replay it that way online. Every era has its own version of Melisandre. Someone patient enough to notice a person who's already been failed twice today and offer them a purpose instead of comfort, because purpose is cheaper to give and far harder to ever take back. It was a woman naming a child's killers before that child had ever chosen to become one herself.